والسلام علي يوم ولدت ويوم أموت ويوم أبعث حيا.
So last time we stopped by verse number 99, Surah Al-Kahf. And inshallah we proceed. عرضنا
وعرضنا جهنم يومئذ للكافرين عرضا الذين كانت أعينهم في غطاء عن ذكري وكانوا لا يستطيعون سمعا أفحسب الذين كفروا أن يتخذوا عبادي من دوني أولياء
إنا أعتدنا
جهنم للكافرين نزلا قل هل ننبئكم بالأخسرين أعمالا الذين ضل سعيهم في الحياة الدنيا وهم يحسبون أنهم يحسنون صنعا.
طيب عليك يا أحمد. الله يشمس.
أولئك الذين كفروا بآيات ربهم ولقائه فحبطت أعمالهم فلا نقيم لهم يوم القيامة وزنا.
الله.
ذلك جزاؤهم جهنم بما كفروا واتخذوا آياتي ورسلي هزوا. إن الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات كانت لهم جنات الفردوس نزلا خالدين فيها لا يبغون عنها حولا.
الله يفتح عليك يا شمس. ما شاء الله. عمرو.
فليعمل عملا صالحا ولا يشرك بعبادة ربه أحدا.
Very good, yeah. ما شاء الله. The إخفاء you make it in a really good way. ما شاء الله. يلا يا أحمد. قال هذا رحمة. الله يفتح عليك. ميكا. Well done, Yamika. MashaAllah. Munib.
إن الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات كانت لهم جنات الفردوس نزلا خالدين فيها لا يبغون عنها حولا قل لو كان البحر مدادا لكلمات ربي لنفد البحر قبل أن تنفد كلمات ربي ولو جئنا بمثله مددا قل إنما أنا بشر مثلكم يوحى إلي أنما إلهكم إله واحد فمن كان يرجو لقاء ربه فليعمل عملا صالحا ولا يشرك بعبادة ربه أحدا.
Well done, ya Munib. Ahmad. وترى قال هذا رحمة.
قال هذا رحمة من ربي فإذا جاء وعد ربي جعله دكا وكان وعد ربي حقا وتركنا بعضهم يومئذ يموت في بعض ونفخ في الصور
فجمعناهم.
وعرضنا جهنم يومئذ للكافرين عرضا الذين كانت أعينهم في غطاء عن ذكري وكانوا لا يستطيعون سمعا أفحسب الذين كفروا أن يتخذوا عبادي من دوني أولياء إنا أعتدنا جهنم للكافرين نزلا.
الله يفتح عليك. يلا يا جماعة. الله يفتح عليك يا جماعة. ما شاء الله. Well done. The sister's side. Yes. لا يبقون. لنفد البحر. لنفد البحر. يمان. لنفد. Come here. Can you please? Yes. إلي أنما
إلهكم إله واحد فمن كان يرجو لقاء ربه فليعمل عملا صالحا
ولا يشرك بعبادة ربه أحدا. Well done, ya Ali, ما شاء الله. Other reciters. No other? Okay. Today we're changing the structure a little. I want someone to read the translation in English slowly and very clearly. If no one is available, I'm happy to do it. Slowly and clearly. ماشي تفضل. And I want you guys to really process that translation, even if you are native Arabic speakers.
And he said, "This is the mercy from my Lord. For when my Lord's promise is fulfilled, he will raise his barrier to the ground.
This is too fast.
My Lord's promise always comes true. On that day, we shall let them surge against each other like waves, and then the trumpet will be blown, and we shall gather them all together. We shall show hell to the disbelievers, those whose eyes were blind to my signs, those who were unable to hear. Did they think that they could take my servants as masters instead of me? We have prepared hell as disbelievers' resting place. Say, prophet, shall we tell you who has the most to lose by their actions, whose efforts in this world are misguided even when they think they are doing good work?
Slow.
It is those who disbelieve in their Lord's messages and deny that they will meet him. Their deeds come to nothing. On the day of resurrection, we shall give them no weight. Their recompense for having disbelieved and made fun of my messages and my messengers will be hell. But those who believe and do good deeds will be given the gardens of paradise. There they will remain, never wishing to leave. Say, prophet, if the whole ocean were ink for writing the words of my Lord, it would run dry before these words were exhausted, even if we were to add another ocean to it. Say, I am only a human being like you, to whom it has been revealed that your God is one. Anyone who fears to meet his Lord should do good deeds and give no one a share in the worship due to his Lord.
Thank you so much, Allah.
Your worship.
Thank you. I give you 1 minute of silent reflection to think of anything that might have surprised you about this passage, anything that puzzles you, anything that stands out, a question that comes to your mind as you read this passage. Anything puzzling, surprising, not making sense, whatever. Anything that stands out. 1 minute. Time is up. Let me begin by something that, surprises me, myself. And then inshallah we'll take it from there. In the text, we come across the word Al-Firdaus. What is Al-Firdaus in English? How is it translated in the text, in the translation? What does it say? Gardens of paradise. Do you see any connection between those two words? Paradise, Firdaus. They sound similar, indeed. This is mainly because this is not an Arabic word. Al-Firdaus is not an Arabic word. Nor is the word paradise. It's an English word. Neither Al-Firdaus is an Arabic word, nor paradise is an English word. Both words come from the Persian language. So the Arabic language appropriated in Arabic literature. There is something called linguistic appropriation. When a specific language appropriates another word. The mainstream school in Quranic studies would say that the Quran has some non-Arabic words. One of which is the word Al-Firdaus. If you really trace sometimes when I ask you what is the origin of this word, what do? You go to the dictionary, you check where it comes from. How do I, decline the word itself? So, for example, darb, hitting, you would find it in the dictionary saying daraba yadribu darban. You don't find this with the word Firdaus because it's not an Arabic word. It's a Persian word. The same thing with English. It's not really an English word. Okay? In the Quran, there are actually many studies that have really tried to trace the occurrence of those words in the Quran. Almost 50 words are somehow agreed upon that these are not really Arabic words. One of which is the word Al-Firdaus. In Surah Al-Kahf, there is another word that is Sundus. What does Sundus mean? Sundus is literally the soft silk. Okay? The same thing. It is originally a Persian word. The word Stabrak. What does it mean? It means thick silk. Thick silk. Where does it come from? It comes from the Greek language. Right? The word إذ قال الحواريون يا عيسى ابن مريم. The word الحواريون. Hawari. It comes from the Ethiopian language. The word Hawariya. The Ethiopian language literally means disciple. A disciple of someone. Remember when the disciples of Jesus said, right? The word Injil. Today, when we think of the Christian tradition, you often come across some people who are called the evangelicals. Where does it come from? It comes from the Injil, the people who really spread the good news. Actually, the word Injil in and of itself, in that language, means those who give good news. This is not an Arabic word. As in, can you think of any usage of this word within an Arabic context before the usage of this word? Before, think of the declension he was talking about. How do you decline a word? For example, you don't say najala yanjilun. It doesn't exist. Right? Okay. How, the next question would be, the Quran uses, how does the Quran claim to be, Quran al-Arabiyyan? The Quran claims to be an Arabic book. How does it use non-Arabic words? Right? As I said, the mainstream school in Quranic studies would say those words have actually been naturalized, in the sense that they have been, even before the Quran came in, the Arabs have used those words as part of their daily language. How did they come across those words? It's simply because they lived in a very interconnected world. They used to go to trade in Syria, in Damascus, Jerusalem. Those areas, they have had many people who spoke different languages. So they picked up words here and there. Those words have become part of the Arabic culture. So when you say the word Injil in Arabic, even though it's not an Arabic word, even before the Quran came in, people used to know what the word Injil means. This whole thing in Arabic, in Quranic studies, today is called loan words. Loan words are those that have been borrowed from other languages. Okay? According to that school, there are two primary reasons for the Quran to use words of other origins. One is what they identify as the universal appeal. The Quran, introduces itself as a universal book. It's a book to everyone. So it must have things that relate to other cultures, to other languages. So it's to do with the universal appeal of the Quran. Another reason they often mention is literally the complexity of the world in which the Quran was revealed. As in, it was not an isolated world. They were based on the trading systems. People would often, communicate with each other and this and that. They picked up languages. Do you want to have one? Sure. No problem. So they picked up words and this and that. So it was not like an isolated world. So, of course, there is a minority school that would say the Quran does not have any sort of non-Arabic words. But that's a really very, very, very tiny minority view. Why? Because it's a fact. Like, you can't deny that. These words have not been used. The rules of Arabic language don't really apply to them as such. We have so many proofs. But what makes the Quran pure Arabic is simply those words have been used by the Arabs before the Quran was revealed. That's it. Languages, pollinate, they communicate. And the fact that the word paradise, today we still use it in English, but we don't really reflect where did this come from. Even linguistically, it sounds weird. Like, okay, what does we don't have so many, I don't think we have any other word in English actually that on the very same morphology, on the very same form. I don't know, if you may think of other words, you would really find it very hard to come up with other words. Why? Because this is not really how this language is built. Nor do we find in Arabic as well. Right? That surprises me in this text. As in, like, it stands out. I'm happy to go on, but let's. I want to listen to you as well. What really surprises you about the text? What do you find puzzling? I don't know, whatever you may have in mind.
I heard something in translation. الذين كانت The translation of dhikri in where I heard it was the signs.
Signs.
The signs.
Hmm.
In my mind, I perceive it differently.
Oh, you mean the translator used the word signs to translate ayat?
Yes.
Oh, dhikri, sorry.
Translate dhikri.
Okay. Interesting.
So I thought it was a bit
Surprising.
however, my main point here is also again.
But let's wait on this for a bit. So, translating the word dhikri as signs. Is this Abdul Halim's translation, Ahmed? Great. That means he understood dhikri to be the Quran. الذين كانت أعينهم في غطاء عن ذكري. They were blinded from our ayat. Those ayat, the word ayah in Arabic has 9 meanings in the Quran. Right? An ayah could mean a miracle, a physical miracle. Right? Could also mean a spiritual miracle. Think of the Quran. It could mean a verse in the way we use the Quran, ayatul Quran. It could mean a sign. You know, we still speak of the unseen world. We haven't seen the unseen world, but Allah sends us signs. Those, the nature of the sign is that it indicates something else. It doesn't tell you, it doesn't let you see it, but it tells you that, you know, this indicates something that you don't see. If that makes sense. So the nature of the sign, you know, think of the sign language. What does the sign language do? It doesn't let you hear the speaker, but it indicates what the speaker is saying. It tells you, what, you know, in another way, this is what is being indicated, but it doesn't let you really see it or hear it as your first experience. Do we see God in the Quran as such? We don't. But those verses indicate that this is, you know, there must be something beyond that. This Quran cannot be the product of a human work. It indicates something else. That's why the Quran introduces itself in so many places as signs. But dhikri could also be translated as reminder. That's why in translation studies, it's a given fact now, it's a principle, it's an axiom in translation. That is, they say translation is an act of interpretation. I think translation is not easy. It means this is the way you understand this text. Simply because those in many a time, the Arabic words would have several English translations. Think of the word ayah. I can translate it as sign. I can do it as Quranic verse. I can do it in so many ways. So translation is an act of interpretation. It means like here you have an interpreter of the Quran, not just a translator. Translation is a very serious enterprise. The second,
yeah, it just removes the eloquency of the text.
I mean,
dhikri,
sure.
in my head, in my mind, dhikri literally means mentioning me or always remember me.
Interesting.
Mentioning me.
Interesting.
Being there.
Interesting.
So jumping to the point of being a sign is understood.
Sure. I mean, when we say that translation is an act of interpretation, it means so many things. It means there is a space for the subjectivity of the translator. This is his interpretation. Of course, it is based on knowledge. It is not based on like, mere opinions. But also, it means that there are other possibilities. To me, this translation, Al-Halim's translation, is literally the best translation existing on the Quran. given the flow of the language and this and that, it's very beautiful. But it doesn't mean we agree with everything in it. There are areas where, Abdul Halim was my PhD supervisor, by the way. Okay, I have much admiration, I have much respect for him. But there are areas where I would disagree on translations. But his language is so poetic, mashallah. So, yes. The second point? What was the second?
So when I said ayunuhum, it was to me that this was the point. The relation between seeing and mentioning, rather than he could have said الذين كانت, for example, أصواتهم أو الذين كانت
أعينهم في غطاء عن ذكري.
الأعين دائما يعني is always related to seeing rather than
listening.
Rather than listening or mentioning, so it's it was very interesting.
Interesting.
I think you answered most of it.
Probably that's the reason he is translating an dhikri as signs, as in they couldn't see my signs. They could not see my signs. No. That's interesting. Thank you so much. Yes, yeah. If we can, if you have a point, I prefer, but if not, I'm happy to listen to a question.
I have a question.
Yes, no problem.
Regarding the utilities you mentioned for the Quran to use Arabic words, I thought maybe there is a third reason, which is that there wasn't any word in the Arabic language that could really allow the Arab mind to imagine the beauty of the paradise or Jannah. And there isn't a word that allows them to do that. And therefore, somewhat, the Quran borrowed these somewhat luxurious words, at least when it comes to the description of Jannah, to make them think, yes, you don't have paradise as such, it's a desert, and where you live is different.
It's beyond your imagination.
It's beyond your imagination, and it's even, the words that are used from other cultures and other civilizations like the Persian are even beyond that. I believe if the Quran used any Arabic word that could describe the beauty of the desert, that wouldn't really appeal to the Muslims and completely completely fulfill the meaning the Quran is trying to say when describing the paradise. There isn't a good Arabic word to do so.
That's a good attempt, but I would take this with a pinch of salt, in the sense that it would impugn the richness of the Arabic language. And we know for a fact that this language is one of the richest languages on earth. So it would never run out of words that may want to express what you really want to say. Actually, other languages may suffer when it comes to them translating the Quran. So it's a very, very rich language. So, but if what you're saying is it adds an element of mystery into it, into the discussion, as in it's a very mysterious place. Paradise, for example, it is something that what you know is that it's a very beautiful place, that you have picked another language's word for it, but you don't even have an equal term to it. I mean, I see where you're coming from. There is a mysterious element to it, probably. Yeah.
There's also a majestic or at least.
How do you find the Prophet ﷺ? He expressed this absolutely beautifully when he was asked about paradise. He said, "Fiha ma la aynu ra'at, wa la udhun sami'at, wa la khatara ala qalbi bashar." He says that paradise, it has what no eyes had seen before. ما لا عين ولا أذن سمعت. And it's beyond what any ears have heard. And it's beyond the imagination of any imaginative heart. This is so poetic. Right? So, I mean, what I'm trying to say is that the Arabic language already is very, very rich. But if what you mean is it's very mysterious, that you don't even, we're not using even the words that you are accustomed to, maybe. I think there is a way to it, yes.
I just thought there isn't, despite the description of Jannah, it might be a bit abstract. And I think the Quran had to use, when thinking about paradise, the Quran used gardens as the most beautiful thing. There's paradise, there's heaven. But the Quran used to describe heaven as gardens and such thing. But the way I see it, the Quran and gardens are the closest thing to that place, so-called heaven. And because ours didn't have gardens as such, more.
Do you mean it was a desert place? They did not have.
Yes.
Okay, could be.
That's what there's like a word equivalent to it to describe the
Oh.
garden very well.
Interesting. No, I see what you mean. That does make sense. That does make sense. Absolutely.
Sorry, the question was regarding the ta'ib. I think it might be good if you could maybe give us the uses of the word nazar, ta'ib, basar, ra'a, ila akhirih, in the Quran that has another dimensions to it.
Sure. الذين كانت أعينهم, the people whose eyes were blinded to our signs. In Arabic, we have the verb for to see is nadara, to see. Also, there is the word ra'a and the word absara. Okay? I'm sure there are other words for the verb for just one English word. So we have nadara, ra'a, absara. They all share one thing as a central point, that is an act of observing, observed something. Absara often adds an element of surprise to it. خرجت من المسجد فأبصرت فلانا. I came out of the masjid, immediately I saw this person. Absara is often used in this context. Ra'a is the closest to the word nadara. It's almost synonymous in the sense that it could mean physical vision. رأيت فلانا, I've seen someone. نظرت إلى فلان, I've looked at someone. But they also have a sense of intellectuality to them. As in, up to this moment, we say in Arabic, أنا أرى, blah, blah, blah. I think. So we use the word أرى to mean I think. We use the word نظر in the very same context to mean I thought about something. فنظرت في الأمر, I thought about the whole issue. So when the Quran uses, of course, the tool or the organ of all this is the eye. When the Quran says, الَّذِينَ كَانَتْ أَعْيُنُهُمْ فِي غِطَاءٍ عَنْ ذِكْرِي, it does not, we should not limit its meaning to the physical vision, but it should also be applied, actually probably more importantly, applied to the thinking faculty. The thinking was blinded. Not only the physical vision, but also the intellectual vision. So the word nadara in Arabic, ayn, as the organ of seeing, is a very deep one. Does this answer the question?
Also, scholars mentioned الرؤية البصرية والرؤية القلبية and the third one. And they give the example of the word رأى النحل that it has maybe more than one before big. They say it is رأى البصرية رأى القلبية. That's what you mean.
Yeah. That's it. That's what I mean when I say thinking. Because the organ for thinking in Arabic is the qalb. Is literally the heart. لهم قلوب لا يعقلون بها. So the organ of the heart of thinking in Arabic is literally the heart. So an example of ara in the Quran is ألم تر كيف فعل ربك بأصحاب الفيل. Of course, Allah is telling the Prophet ﷺ, have you not? It could be. Did you not know what happened to the people of the elephant? That is a ru'ya al-ilmiya or al-qalbiya. It could also be a reference to, have you seen what happened to them? Maybe the Quran is referring to the traces of the people of the elephant. So it's primarily those two meanings. Al-ru'ya al-ilmiya, have you known? As opposed, or equally the ru'ya al-basariya, have you seen what happened to them? And underneath ru'ya al-ilmiya comes, intellectual vision, so to speak, as in anna ara blah blah blah. I think. So it comes down to those two, either the physical one or the non-physical one. The non-physical one could be one of the mind or one of the heart. It all depends. That's a contentious area, like whether you believe the mind and the heart do different things or they are the same thing. That's a contentious area in a way. Does this make sense? Thank you so much. Ahmed?
Sheikh, in this context, the Quran uses mostly the one of the heart and the brain, right? Not the physical.
The Quran, thank you for this question. When we approach the Quran, we should approach it with an expansive mind. The expansive mind, what it does is it broadens the meanings. The Quran never specified, I mean by this the physical vision, or I mean by that only the intellectual one. The Quran uses generic terms. The way we may expand, the more you expand your interpretation and understanding of the Quran, is the more you get out of the Quran. So the Quran uses, I can safely claim that the Quran never specified by saying this, I mean by this the physical one or the non-physical one. That's actually why many scholars would disagree on things. But as a piece of advice, the more expansive we are, the more we may benefit from the Quran. Well, thank you. Yes. Sure.
Question is,
Sure.
verse 109, it says, إِذَا كَانَ الْبَحْرُ مِدَادًا لِكَلِمَاتِ رَبِّي لَنَفِدَ الْبَحْرُ. In this verse, I was always amazed by it, like how Allah explains, كُلُّ كَانَ الْبَحْرُ like it talks about how the words of Allah are enough. Can you
Sure.
cut it for us and
Sure.
explain it? What does it mean exactly?
Sure.
Because it's not only
That's true.
physical
That's true.
words here. There is a context.
Indeed. The verse is saying, قُلْ لَوْ كَانَ الْبَحْرُ مِدَادًا لِكَلِمَاتِ رَبِّي لَنَفِدَ الْبَحْرُ قَبْلَ أَن تَنْفَذَ كَلِمَاتُ رَبِّي. We're looking at the penultimate verse, the one before the last one. If it tells the Prophet ﷺ, if the ocean was ink for the words of my Lord, this ink would come to an end, would be exhausted before the words of my Lord get exhausted. Literally because the words of my Lord are infinite and the ink is finite. When the Quran uses this expression, words of my Lord, it does not mean the verses of the Quran. As in, it does not mean the words of the Quran. Why? Because those words of the Quran are, what are they? They are limited, they are finite. We know how many words are there in the Quran. So, maybe with this pen, you can write the entire Quran. So we know for a fact that this is not really referring to the words of the Quran. The vast majority of Quran commentators would say this is actually referring to the meanings of the Quran. The meanings of the Quranic verses. And that relates to the question you just asked, Ya. Every generation will always find meanings in the Quran. And the more knowledgeable we become about our world, the more the Quran provides us with more meanings. Think of one of the phenomenal minds of the 20th century. He's an Egyptian thinker with the name of Mustafa Mahmoud, who drew on the Quran more from the scientific side of it, as in trying to see what the Quran has to say, has to speak, how the Quran speaks to someone who lives in the 20th century. One of our, actually it's something that an agreed upon thing within the Islamic tradition. Every generation would have to produce Muslim scholars who draw on the Quran, who provide tafsirs for their own time. Because as we advance in time, new ideas come about, and therefore I need to understand what the Quran have to say on that. Whether the Quran agrees, disagrees, confirms, rejects. So from that perspective, the meanings of the Quran are infinite. Some other scholars, that's a minority one though, would say that what is meant by the reference to the words of my Lord here is a reference to God's creative power. In the sense that in the Quran speaks of إذا قضى أمرا فإنما يقول له كن فيكون. When God wills something, He says be and it becomes. This is infinite. So there is no end to Allah's wills or to Allah's commandments from that perspective. Right? Either way, either interpretation is plausible. I tend to agree more with the first one, but both are possible interpretations, absolutely. But we know for a fact this is not really referring to the words of the Quran, otherwise these are finite ones. This makes sense? Allah,
Can it
yes?
also mean that, like Allah was telling the Prophet that the Quran is not only my word, so it's not only the text that I revealed, for example, or something, or it's not only the only message that I have. And there's much more.
In what sense?
Like, this is like God telling the Prophet
Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam.
that
Oh,
it's
do you
not
mean?
only my word.
Oh,
There is,
okay.
like what you know from the Quran as well. Maybe the Prophet also didn't know every single
Interesting.
interpretation of the Quran,
Interesting.
or meaning
Interesting.
of every single verse. Or
Interesting. That's a beautiful observation, Ya Ahmad. So as if Allah is telling the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, what you've received is just maybe one version, but the ways in which Allah speaks is beyond count.
and why I say this, because directly after it says, "إِنَّمَا أَنَا بَشَرٌ مِثْلُكُمْ," like I'm like you, and the Prophet like humbles himself. Directly.
That's a beautiful correlation, indeed. Because right after that, the Quran says, "Innama ana basharun mithlukum." I'm just a human being like yourselves. Whatever I'm delivering to you comes to me only by revelation. Ryan, how are you? Nice to have you with us today. Any mistakes or not yet? Any mistakes for today or not yet? Okay. Any other points? Or? Yes. Yeah, sure. Apologies. Can you please specify what the question is when it comes to this point? The biggest losers. Okay. Why would not the Quran describe them as such? Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Oh, okay. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. And the second question? Mm-hmm. Mm. 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 Absolutely. Thank you so much. Two excellent questions, mashallah. So the first question, may I have your name, please? Khadija. The first question is to do with الذين ضل سعيهم في الحياة الدنيا وهم يحسبون أنهم يحسنون صنعا. Khadija's question is saying, why does the Quran specify? You know, the verse is literally saying الذين ضل سعيهم في الحياة الدنيا, those who have lost it, whose deeds did not come to any fruition in this world, even though they think they are doing good work. وهم يحسبون أنهم يحسنون صنعا. قل هل ننبئكم بالأخسرين أعمالا? Shall we tell you about the people who have the greatest loss? It's the people whose deeds did not come to any fruition in this world, even though they think they are doing good. And the question says, why does the Quran specify? Even though the losers are too many, they come in different shapes, in different categories, and that. Why does the Quran specify those people, the people who think they are doing good? We said before that when are two ways when it comes to how we may approach the Quran. There is what we call the holistic reading and the atomistic reading. By the holistic, we mean when we read the Quran in its entirety with a holistic vision. The atomistic is when we literally divide the Quran, looking at each verse by verse without looking at the context. So the holistic helps you with the context. You need for you to really get the essence of what this verse is about. You need to look at the holistic picture. This very verse comes at the end of Surah Al-Kahf. Surah Al-Kahf, we've had several discussions about this in the past. one of its key and very central themes is the theme of fitan, temptations. Right? We've had the fitnatu, the people of the cave, they had a specific fitna. They were fitnatud deen. They had a difficult time they were persecuted and this and that. We had the fitna of al-mal, the fitna of wealth. We had the fitna of knowledge, and we had the fitna of power with Dhil Qarnayn. The fitna of knowledge is with Moses. The fitna of wealth is with the man of the two gardens. Fitna to deen is with the people of the cave. The essence of fitna, when fitna comes by, if you are one of those people who have chosen the wrong side in a situation of fitna, you would not normally choose this knowing that this is the wrong side. You choose it thinking that it's the right side. That's the very definition of the ABC fitna, is that you don't really know. You actually think this is the right track. This verse is talking about the various types of fitan that people have been exposed to in Surah Al-Kahf. That of deen, fitna of faith, the fitna of wealth, the fitna of knowledge, the fitna of power. The people who chose the wrong side of history will always think, in the midst of those conversations, they always think we are the right ones. You know, think of Surah Al-Baqarah. وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ لَا تُفْسِدُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ. When they are told, do not cause corruption on earth, what do they say? إِنَّمَا نَحْنُ مُصْلِحُونَ. We are actually, we think we are the good doers. And then the Quran says, أَلَا إِنَّهُمْ هُمُ الْمُفْسِدُونَ وَلَكِنْ لَا يَشْعُرُونَ. Indeed, they are the corrupt ones. They are the ones causing corruption, but they don't really know. So, ضَلَّ سَعْيُهُمْ فِي الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا وَهُمْ يَحْسَبُونَ أَنَّهُمْ يُحْسِنُونَ صُنْعًا. The very definition of fitna. That's very confusing because of that. Right? A second question. What was it? Sorry. Okay. فحسب الذين كفروا أن يتخذوا عبادي من دوني أولياء. Do the disbelievers, do the deniers think that they may take my servants as their protectors or helpers besides me? The key word here is the word awliya. Awliya is a very profound word in the Quran. And it has so many meanings. Primarily, awliya could mean helpers, could also mean protectors, could also mean friends, and other meanings. And I like what you said, Khadija, that we should always employ an expansive, that's actually what I said, an expansive interpretation of the Quran. Expand as much as you can. Whatever you take as something that is besides Allah, be it a CEO or whatever, profession, employer, friends, whatever you may think of. We should not, especially when the Quran is not limiting. The Quran said awliya in the general. We should not specify. It applies to anyone who takes protectors. I think in this context, probably protectors would be a more congenial translation, as in awliya as protectors. You know, I'm thinking of Surah Al-Ankabut, where it has that verse that says, مَثَلُ الَّذِينَ اتَّخَذُوا مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ أَوْلِيَاءَ. The example of the people who take as their protectors against Allah, كَمَثَلِ الْعَنْكَبُوتِ اتَّخَذَتْ بَيْتًا. It is like the spiders' houses. وَإِنَّ أَوْهَنَ الْبُيُوتِ لَبَيْتُ الْعَنْكَبُوتِ. The weakest of all houses is that of spiders' houses. لَوْ كَانُوا يَعْلَمُونَ. If only they know. So, awliya أفحسب الذين كفروا أن يتخذوا عبادي من دوني أولياء. It's a very, yes, we should actually understand this in a very expansive way. It applies to anyone who takes as helpers, protectors. Think of, when we had this discussion, when we were discussing the second story of Surah Al-Kahf, the man of the two gardens. The Quran actually comments on this story. أفتتخذونه وذريته أولياء من دوني. Do you take Iblis and his progeny as your protectors or helpers besides me? And at that point we had a discussion on that the entire world can be divided into two parties. One is Hizbullah, I mean not the Lebanese one, Hizbullah as in the party of Allah. I mean, actually, let's choose another word. The people who side with Allah, Hizb Shaitan, as the Shaitan's party, right? Either you take this as your protector or as your helper, or you take that. So the whole world can be divided into that, either this or that. So if you're not with this party, you are with that party. As simple as that. Yes. Other points?
Does it have to do with wala, loyalty?
Yes, definitely. I am loyal to my helpers. I am loyal to my protector. I am loyal by definition to my friend. Surely. Yes. Yeah, that is true. But it's not in this context though. We'll come to this. Inshallah, we'll come to this. Any other thing that surprises you for the text? Yes, yeah.
Maybe a little bit similar to the first question, but it's like there's a big focus on Amal Saleh and Iman at the same time. Amal Saleh and Iman. So like here that in the translation it says. Those who disbelieve in their laws and deny that they will meet their needs come to nothing on the day of resurrection should give them the ways. Even if they think they're doing good. So it's like even if you're doing, you think you're doing good deeds, if you don't have this belief, you don't have this belief in your laws, it sort of distinguishes these sort of good deeds that you're doing, and it mentions again like towards the end. ومن كان يقول part of being فليعمل عملا صالحا ولا يشرك بعبادة ربه أحدا. State like doing عمل صالح also having this belief in God. I think it also sort of matches some of the kind of the stories in the Surah as well. Like Al-Kahf, they have the iman, they have the good deeds, and they have the strong iman in their Lord. And one of the people that of the two gardens, he has like the iman in his Lord, he believes in his God and stuff like that, and has strong belief in it. While the other guy maybe has like no belief. Sayyidina Musa, he has his iman and he's still trying to do the good deeds. Same with Al-Qarnayn, he has trying to do the good deeds and stuff. And there's other examples of people who he interacted with that weren't doing good deeds. And so sort of maybe looking at maybe some of the themes from the surah is like people that are trying to do good deeds and have a strong faith, and comparing them to others that don't have the good deeds and don't have a strong faith. And maybe it seems to conclude with it as well. Whoever wants to meet his Lord should do the good deeds and make sure they don't sort of associate others with their thoughts.
That is an excellent point Ahmed is making. The Quran always, actually in no less than 70 places, the Quran combines faith, iman, with good deeds. A good construct that every Muslim would know, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. Faith has to be accompanied by good deeds. The Salaf always took good deeds as the sign of one's faith. They would say, Al-Imanu, a very famous phrase they would use, Al-Imanu, ma waqara fil qalbi wa saddaqahu al-amal. Faith is what is firmly established in the heart terms of conviction, that has been verified by your deeds. The only way you can verify your faith is one's deed. Otherwise, everyone can claim things. People claim things. But how do they verify what they claim? The Quran takes al-amal as-salih as probably one of the key verifiers of the depth of one's faith. And when fitan happens, people claim faith. But the only thing that will verify that faith is the good deed. You can't claim good deed. It's either you do it or you don't. Sometimes the Quran begins with al-amal as-salih before it mentions faith. كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس تأمرون بالمعروف وتنهون عن المنكر وتؤمنون بالله. Actually begins with acting good before it talks about having faith. It's a very central thing. And yes, indeed, at times of fitan, probably the one and only thing that may distinguish and show the depth of your faith is just al-amal as-salih. It verifies whether you're really faithful or not. Thank you. Other points or questions? Puzzling stuff? Amr?
So the point is, at the end it says, and ordinarily I would have expected it to say,
Interesting. So, why does the Quran specify ibadah? That's a beautiful thing. Again, speaking of the idea of expanding the meanings of the Quran. An expansive mind. Expansive versus contractive. There is a mind that expands the meanings and a mind that really contracts meanings or limits the meanings, so to speak. The Quran is saying we could be worshipping other people besides Allah. We could be worshipping our wealth. We could be worshipping our employers. We could be worshipping our own desires. And the Quran is very clear on this. It does not use this as a metaphor. It uses this literally. It says, أَفَرَأَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهَهُ هَوَاهُ. Have you seen the one who takes as his Lord his own desires? This goes perfectly in line with what Amr is saying. Ordinarily, you would expect the Quran to be saying, وَلَا يُشْرِكْ بِرَبِّهِ أَحَدًا. That faithful person would not associate partners with Allah. The verse is not saying that. The verse is saying they associate others in the worship of Allah. That means they worship someone else besides Allah. That could be the desires, could be the wealth, could be knowledge, could be power. So many things to be worshipped. And it's the idea of idols. We always have idols. Ibrahim alayhi salam is often taken as the biggest destroyer of idols. The famous story of him destroying the idols of his own father, his own people. And the process that he went through for him to arrive at this conclusion. When he looks at the sun, looks at the sea, at the moon, and he sees they both set. He wants to worship something that is always there. It does not go away. So yes, we worship other things besides Allah at times, actually many times. Well, thank you for the Amr. Anything else that is surprising, puzzling? Yes, of course.
Who is the Quran talking about? Does this go back to previous?
That's an excellent question. Yes. وتركنا بعضهم, we began with this verse, وتركنا بعضهم يومئذ يموج في بعض. تركنا, you know, we in the previous discussion, the discussion was on Ya'juj and Ma'juj, that Dhul Qarnayn built this dam or barrier by way of drawing a hijab or a barrier between us and them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, by the day of judgment, I will let you both loose on each other. Yamuj fi ba'd. Yamuj comes from mawj. Mawj means, can be translated as literally mawj, as in waves. Waves against each other, striking each other. The mainstream interpretation is before the day of judgment, or by the day of judgment, that barrier would be taken down, be destroyed. Actually, some interpreters would actually say that we are in this very time. The amount of killing that we witness today. That's part of the expansion of the Quranic meanings, by the way. As in, people always expect drama. You know, when this happens, you know, we need to see like literally a barrier or a dam that is being destroyed. We don't even know what this dam is to begin with. People think it's the Chinese wall. We have no proof. It could actually be talking about us. The people that have been killed, literally in the last 100 years, are way more than those that have been killed in the entire history of humanity as a whole. Think of the World War I, World War II. What's happening today in probably every corner of the world? Mawj also has that connotation of loose killing. Everyone is, you know, the Prophet ﷺ is reported to have said, سيكون زمن فيه فتن, there will be a time that is full of fitan. When it happens, لا يدري القاتل فيما قتل ولا المقتول فيما قتل. No, neither the killer knows why he killed, nor the killed knows why he was killed. So it's a very loose time, right? So it could be the time where we live. Allahu Alam. But that's the thing with, you know, people often talk about the signs of the Day of Judgment, expecting drama to happen. You know, they talk about the major signs of the Day of Judgment, the minor signs, and this and that. The Prophet ﷺ, this is not the way he dealt with those things. You know, we are told that Sahih al-Bukhari, the Prophet ﷺ, when there was a I think it was a solar eclipse, kusuf, kasafat al-shamsu ala ahdi Rasulillah. There was an eclipse. The Prophet the people said, kasafat al-shamsu li mawti Ibrahim. It was the time when his own son died. So they thought the sun eclipsed because of the Prophet's son's dying. How does the Prophet ﷺ react to that? What was he doing? The narrators of the hadith say, ففزع رسول الله إلى المسجد يخشى أن تكون الساعة. The Prophet ran towards the masjid to pray, to be, you know, involved in prayer, to be engaged with prayer, for fear that this is the Day of Judgment. He did not say, you know, where is the bigger signs? Where is the major sign? Where is the, you know, Dajjal? Where is nothing? Nothing. But because of our dramatic interpretation, dramatic understanding of the Quran, we expect things to be happening in a very specific way. It has to be so specific. The wall has to be destroyed. We don't even know where it is. The verse is, again, as he said, we should actually be as expansive as we can. It is referring to a time of mawj, harj. You know, hadith is يكون زمن فيه الهرج والمرج, a time where people literally are somehow killing each other. Always, you know, controversies and conflicts and this and that. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu narrated, إِنَّ مِنْ أَشْرَاطِ السَّاعَةِ, one of the signs of the Day of Judgment, أَنْ يَقِلَّ الْعِلْمِ, that knowledge becomes so rare. وَيَثْبُتَ الْجَهْلِ, and jahl, ignorance becomes so widely spread. وَيَكْثُرَ الْهَرْجُ وَالْمَرْجُ, the people, would always be killing each other and insulting, slandering, and this and that. Our time, Allahu Alam. So it is a reference. Wallahu Alam. Of course, the verse is not saying specifically, but the vast majority of commentators would say it's to do with this. The reference is to the people of Ya'juj and Ma'juj. Yeah. Other points? Yes, Abu Jahl. Indeed. Absolutely. The Prophet ﷺ is reported to have said, the last verses of Surah Al-Kahf, in another narration, the first couple of verses of Surah, the first 10 verses of Surah Al-Kahf protect one from Ad-Dajjal, in the sense that they literally remind you of why you're here. Actually, Surah Al-Kahf as a whole, out of the entirety of the Quran, the Prophet recommends that we read it on a weekly basis. Simply because it summarizes the story of humans and the engagement with fitan and the engagement with the temptations and challenges they face. The last 10 verses of Surah Al-Kahf, they literally summarize how should we deal with those moments of afflictions, faith and good deeds, with that expansive mind. And that's the thing with the times of fitan. It needs people who have perception, good perception, but the people of basair, for them to see the signs. Because you could be seeing things, but you don't really reflect on them. And that's part of the reason why the Quran says, قُلْ لَوْ كَانَ الْبَحْرُ مِدَادًا لِكَلِمَاتِ رَبِّي لَنَفَدَ الْبَحْرُ قَبْلَ أَن تَنفَدَ كَلِمَاتُ رَبِّي. You have to open your eyes for you to see, what is happening. So the last 10 verses of Surah Al-Kahf as a whole, if you wish, the Prophet ﷺ identifies it as one that protects you against the Antichrist, Ad-Dajjal. Again, our imagination of Ad-Dajjal is a very specific one. Right? It could be. We haven't seen anything. We haven't seen that person. We have various hadiths that describe his physical appearance. Right? And that's literally the main issue, how the figure of Ad-Dajjal is understood by many scholars. But we should not limit the idea of Antichrist to one single thing. As in the Quran speaks, as I just said, it could be a reference to a time of conflict, a time of wars, a time of this, a time of that. You just need to open your eyes. It's a time of fitan. At times of fitan, you have to really sharpen your mind and open your basira, open your perception to what is happening. Am I really taking heed or not? That's the very point. So, reflecting on those verses definitely protects one against the temptations of the Dajjal and the delusions of the Dajjal. Those delusions, again, I'm emphasizing this, we should not really link them to one specific figure. Because there is not a single verse in the Quran that talks about Dajjal. So it could be a reference to everything that is tempting, to everything that examines your faith, to anything that really puts your faith to the test. And we have so many of those. If that makes sense. Other points? Ryan, any point? Aywa. Come on. I'm sure I've made a mistake somewhere. No pressure. Yes, yeah.
Question. What evidence do we have that a verse can have multiple meanings? What evidence do we have that a verse can have multiple meanings? And he wants to say, yes, there's
Oh, that's an excellent question. That is an excellent question. How do I know? The verse is the Quran in and of itself. The Quran says, هو الذي أنزل عليك الكتاب منه آيات محكمات هن أم الكتاب وأخر متشابهات. The Quran says Allah is the one who revealed the book to you. In it, there are foundational verses. These ones act as decisive, very clear ones. وأخر متشابهات. And he says there are other verses that are not very clear. From this, we know that the Quran has verses that are clear in meaning and other verses that are not clear. Though the ones that are clear, we should not have even a monolith understanding of those verses. But whatever the ways in which we understand those verses should not be mutually exclusive. As in, think of the word of al-fitna, for example. You might link the word fitna to one single thing. Could be to money, could be to women, could be to men, whatever. If the Quran is not specific, keep the word general. Keep it to anything that really puts your faith to the test. Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu and Abdullah ibn Abbas, they both emphasize this. The Quran ظاهر وباطن, that the Quran has apparent meanings and inner meanings. That is something that was so common in early Islam. How do I verify that this interpretation or this reading is not problematic when the apparent meaning and the inner meaning are not mutually exclusive? Right? This is the way we should safely expand the meanings of the Quran without falling into our own opinions and this and that. If that makes sense.
So is it only
I'll give you an example. Imam al-Ghazali talks about this in his Risala al-Qudsiyya. Musa alayhi salam, when he gets asked, before he encounters Allah in Mount Sinai, اخلع عليك إنك بالوادي المقدس طوى. Before you come into direct communication with Allah, take your shoes off. Right? I mean, there is the literal understanding of this, that Musa alayhi salam is being asked to take his shoes off. Because you are coming into a very sacred place. You should come to it, when someone comes into the masjid today, the first thing they do is they take their shoes off. By way of respecting the masjid, its sacredness, whatever, right? Musa alayhi salam is being asked to take his shoes off as he's coming into as a very sacred place. That's the literal understanding of it. There is also the figurative, or you may call it the metaphorical, so to speak, where many scholars would say the reference is also to Moses to put every worry behind his back. This is the place where you are meant to be fully devoted to Allah. Put everything behind. Put everything that you own. Put everything that you enjoy behind your back. Here, you are meant to be fully devoted. Those two interpretations, are they mutually exclusive? What if Moses comes into that inner, that sacred space, he took his shoes off, but his mind is not there. His heart is not there. Does this do the job? It is not, does it? So that led many scholars to say that's actually a reference. It has an apparent reference and an inner reference. The apparent reference is to the shoes, the inner reference is actually the apparent reference is a symbol of his inner purification. Think of wudu, for example. We do wudu by way of physically purifying ourselves before we come into the prayer. But what if we come into the prayer, but my heart is not there, my mind is not there? Does this carry any value? It doesn't. So they both have, that's what we call spiritual. So you may call this literal. The second one is called spiritual. A spiritual reading of something. Spiritual is composed of two words, ritual. It's composed of ritual and speed refers to the spirit. The spiritual tradition, the spiritual interpretation aims to literally fill the rituals with meanings. If the rituals you're performing are free of meanings, they have no value. So the function of those interpretations is that they help fill and feed our rituals with meanings. Again, think of Moses' situation. If he comes barefooted, but his mind is not there, his heart is not there, is he compliant with the divine commandment? No, he's not. When we come into the prayer, if we're not really focused, even if after we've done the wudu and this and that, the whole function of the wudu is to remind ourselves that we should purify ourselves. We come into a sacred time, we should come to it pure. That in the Shafi'i school, there is something in fiqh, it's called al-ma'ul musta'mal. When you come to study fiqh, one of the very early themes you study is called al-ma'ul musta'mal. The used water, the second-hand water that has been used. Because for the scarcity of water back then, people would struggle to find water. So what happens is, you might be using, they would use very little, a jug of water, whatever. Very, very small things. And they would actually be keen on preserving this water because they had little water. There were discussions on the purity, whether this water that falls from your organs when you make wudu, whether this water is clean or pure or not. The vast majority of our fuqaha, they would say it is pure. Right? Imam Shafi'i, or the Shafi'i school would say no, it is not pure. Why? He says, because the function of wudu is that it literally washes your own sins. When you wash your face, that water with which you wash your face goes away with the sins you've committed with your eyes. When you rinse your mouth, that water goes away with the sins you've committed with your tongue. Apply this across the board, the feet, the ears, everything. He says, a water that is mixed with sins cannot be pure. Therefore, that used water is not pure. That is a spiritual interpretation. That mixes the spiritual with the ritual. That feeds the ritual with the spirit. Right? They both go hand in hand. In today's world, unfortunately, you have people who either emphasize this or that. When they are meant both to go hand in hand. Your work ritually should go hand in hand with your work spiritually. Don't be one-sided. Do not be one-sided. Who asked this question? Amr, thank you. Any other points before we bring this to a close? My name is skipping. Okay. If there are no other points, I'll probably bring this to a close. Inshallah. Of course, probably one tiny point I want to raise. Surah Al-Kahf, one of the very interesting things about it, it begins and ends with the same subject. It begins by talking about the book. Alhamdulillah, الذي أنزل على عبده الكتاب ولم يجعل له عوجا. It ends with talking about the book. قل لو كان البحر مدادا لكلمات ربي لنفذ البحر قبل أن تنفذ كلمات ربي لو جئنا بمثله مددا. Yes, Hiraya, please. The word. Did I say, do you mean the word, I mentioned the word CEO? Is that what you meant? Oh, yeah, you're right, thank you. It was protector. The other one was helper. The third one was friend. Am I right? Yes, these were the three words. Absolutely, they are related to people. They are all related to people. Excellent. That's an excellent point, yeah, Rayyan. MashaAllah. MashaAllah. I really like Rayyan's points. He always makes very valid points. I really wish we had more people like him. Allah yahfadak ya Rayyan, MashaAllah. So it's all mostly related to people. We often take people as our protectors, as our helpers, as our friends. Most important thing is, yes, you can have helpers, you can have friends, but make sure that Allah is always in the middle. Allah is always at the center of things. Back to the point, the book, the Surah Al-Kahf begins with the discussion on the book. The Quran ends with a discussion on the book as well. It begins with a discussion on the function of the Prophet ﷺ as a mubashir or munzir, as a warner and as a bringer of good news. قيما لينذر بأسا شديدا من لدن لينذر ويبشر المؤمنين الذين يعملون الصالحات أن لهم أجرا حسنا. The same thing ends with the reward of those who have been given the good news and the punishment of those who have been given the warnings. As if the Quran is telling us that what will save us in the midst of those fitan is the Quran itself. Stick to it. لَمْ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ عِوَجًا. You will never go wrong with it because it is straight. Wallahu alam. Inshallah, next week we begin a new chapter, Surah Maryam. Have as normal, a holistic reading of the chapter, followed by the analytic one. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. Thank you so much, before I forget, for such excellent questions, excellent comments. Literally every single comment, every single question. Ahmad, Muhammad, Amru, Ayha, Ahmad, everyone who asked, Rayyan, of course, at the top of all those. Your questions made the session. And the sister who asked some excellent questions, very valid ones, very subtle ones. Thank you so much. Inshallah, we'll see you next week. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك.
مباركا أينما كنت وأوصاني بالصلاة